Hey everybody, today I am going to be reviewing Strange Darling. This was directed by J.T. Molnar. I knew nothing about this director before this film came out, and looking him up, it seems he had quite an interesting background, an interesting childhood. He's an obvious cinephile who appreciates maybe a good genre pastiche. So often today those elements are more used to be self-indulgent just because the director really enjoys the nostalgic aspects of them. But this one, I think, instead uses those elements almost like it's a gateway drug. And that is going to open up into this whole area that maybe we're not used to exploring on the surface. You know, a lot of the abstract, grisly, dark, very painful fragments of the unconscious mind. I loved this movie. This is the one. This is the one where I was just like, oh, yes, it got those kinds of feelings. This film is cohesive, it is very present, it is unrelenting in its tension, it is really confident in its perspective, and this is also one of the most vulnerable pieces of work that I've seen all year beyond just kind of the stylish attitude as it's dressing. I do not like to get into spoilers in my reviews, as you know. I try to kind of keep the plot specifics and everything to a bare minimum, but even so, I'm telling you, if you have not seen this film yet, I advise you to go in knowing as little as possible. Try not to be influenced by a review. Do not watch a trailer, just soak it all in, because I think just as an experience, it's one of the best of the year, easily. The film uses a non-linear chapter framing and kind of a grindhouse feel that is very Quentin Tarantino in style, and that's going to help bring us into the fun house, essentially. It uses more of the kind of visceral, abstract, skeletal nature of something like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre to sort of help find honesty, I think, within the violence. And then it's using kind of a Twin Peaks Lynchian sort of thing to tie all of the illusory angles together, and it's kind of housing the higher concepts, more the thesis. And like I said, all of these elements are so familiar, and we see these types of movies all the time, and yet it didn't bother me from this filmmaker just because he's using them so in his own way. It's never a situation where he is too infatuated with the references themselves. I mentioned last week when I reviewed the Zoe Kravitz film, Blink Twice, I think is what it was called, and I talked about a type of filmmaker that is very in vogue right now. It's both men and women, but it's kind of, I call it the wedding-obsessed girl type filmmaker. The type of person more interested in the wedding than the actual marriage, and it's the same as the type of filmmaker who is more interested in the aesthetic and the Hollywood trappings compared to the actual content of the piece. But this was the first time where it actually felt like this person was interested in the actual substance. He felt like a level-headed storyteller. I think Molnar understands that the spectrum of emotions we have as human beings often cannot be encapsulated through language, through words. Some things are just too complex, too stirring to be able to, pin a word down to it. And I think he kind of feels the same way maybe about genre. Like sometimes genres cannot encapsulate all of what he wants to express, so he's going to use them more kind of as framing. None of the characters in this movie have names, as an example. They are all like symbols, archetypes, very similarly to like what Christopher Nolan does. But unlike Nolan, I think that this filmmaker found the balance between the timeline subversion and the skeletal simplicity, the complex emotions at the center of it, where we don't have to get too flustered and analytical in order to explore it. The film floats in a very dreamy place, and yet it has this kind of speckled, imperfect texture to it that weighs it down and roots it in what is primal always. I think this movie is in part about the games and the roles that we play with each other in order not only to survive, but also to feel alive. And it's all very slippery. It's like characters in this movie can have entire conversations about their lives, where they've been, who they are, and yet you can never take it at a literal level, at face value. But again, I don't think this movie is about what is said necessarily. It's about all of the things that are going on beneath what is said that could possibly be manipulative. And what better way to explore all of that complexity than through the idea of love, or maybe initial attraction between a man and a woman? Because that is where all of our emotions are put to the test in a very heightened sort of way in a situation like that. And I see this film as, I see it as a love story. A love story where the pacing, the rhythm, the tension of it all works in a very mangled yet beautiful way. Because in love, so much can happen, it can feel so chaotic, and yet maybe when the love story ends, when you break up, it's like, was that real? Did that actually happen? It feels almost like a dream. You might think, who was I, at that time during that relationship? I don't even recognize that person. And yeah, obviously there's like a drug aspect to love, which kind of distorts things. But there's also this feeling of authenticity and romance where you cannot manufacture it. And most importantly, you cannot explain it. And I think that is the key with this movie, is knowing that love is something that you cannot explain attraction. So many people think they can, but you can't. You may have a situation where it's like, there's a guy that's really into you. He has the perfect job. He's got a great family. It's like he has everything going for him. And yet, for whatever reason, you're just not into it. Instead, you're into that weird guy in the corner that everybody thinks is weird. Maybe he deals drugs on the side, but it's like you can't help it. Compatibility can only take us so far. The rest exists in the margin and comes out through art like this. The film shuffles the plot around in a way that is very direct. It is trying to subvert your expectations very specifically, but I think it does it in a really clever way. And it's like it's always planting these clues throughout the movie, and they're very clear. And it builds the tension so beautifully that when you get to that third act, it's like, it just goes wild, and you have no idea where it's going to go until the final moment of the film. The whole idea of role play, I've talked about that before. I talked about it as an example in my recent review for Hitman, and I find all of that very interesting. How there's like this deep abyss of feelings that exist within sex that are often never uttered to your partner, even if they're the love of your life. We access those emotions through pretend, through performance, and sexuality, of course, that comes out through like role play and BDSM. Often it comes from experience and confidence, and all of that is going to contribute to the facets of sex we have as we age. And obviously that's going to make sex a lot more interesting as you get older. So I think the dynamic between these two people, we're always returning to this hotel room in the movie. And it's just a simple premise of two people trying to have sex for the first time. This scene is partially about consent, but I found it to be incredibly refreshing just because scenes like this exist a lot in movies, but in our current times, they're often very simplified, the dynamics between men and women. The whole consent thing can get complicated where it's not just a yes or no type of situation, but that often puts men in a very precarious position because it's like, how can a man be dominant and excite a woman in a way that's going to really thrill her in a post-Me Too world? Harassment is, of course, it's bad, but you know what? Some of the great romances that I know began from some sort of harassment or relentless pursuit. And again, I'm not condoning that literally. I'm just saying that often authentic romantic feelings come from something that is kind of messy or very serendipitous. And when we live in a modern world where we're quick to blame men, see them as the villains, and women are often playing the victim card, it's really hard to find the gray area between the sexes. But within all of this, still, both of our main characters, the man and the woman, they're both very complex, and their roles are constantly shifting so far as who they are to each other. Sometimes you can't tell who's the villain and who is the victim, and by the end of it, both of them are given such a humanity where you end up feeling for both of them. You feel for them because, I bring it back to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, obviously a big influence in the movie like I mentioned, but it's not necessarily the literal situations that are happening, but more the sensations that are evoked from here. How that can create like a subliminal tunnel beneath the very kind of surfacey type of story. Willa Fitzgerald plays the main actress in this, and she is fabulous in this. This is one of the best performances of the year. I think she's a huge reason why this whole thing comes together with a nice, beautiful bow. It's a harrowing role, but it also calls for a lot of detail because she's asked to be very cunning and in specific ways. Not a single thing she says in the movie, like I said, can be taken at face value, and she is talented in the sense that she finds the character within the subtext, and she never has to say it. It's like we just figure it out for ourselves as an audience. Without that kind of talent from your leads, I don't think that this movie would have worked. The emotion has to be believable. You want to follow this woman no matter what she does or how you might view her, from, being cruel and callous to wounded like a little child. She has this sarcastic streak where she's quite funny. It's like she has everything inside to play with as an actress, yet she's making everything feel so real. And I think part of it is because she has like this lethargic, dark, mysterious quality to her face where it's like you sense a major sadness since she's been hurt in life, but she also has this chilling sexiness that is quite intriguing. And yeah, I just think she's asked to go to all kinds of different places in this role. She does it all so effortlessly. I am so impressed with this woman. This is a kind of a star-making part, I think. And this is a movie. I love to say that. It's like when I see a movie I love that sticks the landing, I'm like, it's a movie. It feels like a full experience. This film has the quality where it's like grabbing you very tightly by the arm and it does not let go until you see the credits. It takes a keen interest in exploring primality, and I'm always drawn to that. Suspense is typically so telegraphed with less confident filmmakers, but I think this guy is a revelation. I think this is so wonderful. I cannot stress enough You have to see this film. And that is my review. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'm going to plug my website as always. It is deepfocuslens.com. I'm an artist. I do commission portraits and I sell prints of my work. If that is something that you're interested in, you can always go to the website below. And if you have a question about a commission or a print, you can always email me. My email is in the description box below as well. Also, I'd like to give a shout out to my patrons who are great. Guys, thank you so much for your support. Welcome to all the new members. If you are interested in supporting, the link for that is below, as well as the rest of my social media information. You can watch more videos here, and you can subscribe if you'd like. Catch you next time.